He was just a hungry orphan with nothing left in the world. But when 12-year-old Tobias stumbled upon a dying native girl near the creek, the choice he made next would alter two lives and two worlds forever. What followed proved that even the smallest hands can carry the heaviest hearts. The sun beat down relentlessly on the dusty settlement as Tobias Crow pressed his face to the smudged glass of the general store. His stomach had gone hollow after 2 days without food, and the strips of jerky hanging behind a window looked like a miracle. Inside, Homer Gentry, the store's owner, caught sight of Tobias's desperate gaze and rapped his knuckles hard on the glass. Tobias jumped back, bare feet stumbling on the hot wooden planks. Homer pushed through the door, his guts straining against the buttons of his vest. "Off my porch, you little stray," he barked. "Ain't nothing here for beggars." Tobias wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "I got 3 cents, sir. Just need some hardtack." 3 cents. Homer scoffed, sharp and mean. "That won't buy the string it's wrapped in." He grabbed the boy by the shoulder and shoved him toward the road. "Go find a ditch to die in. Quit scaring off real customers." Tobias staggered but stayed on his feet. He'd learned early not to fall. It only made things worse. He turned and walked toward the creek that snaked behind the town, where cottonwoods cast long shadows and cool water ran clear. At least there, he could drink deep and maybe catch a small fish if he was lucky. But as he neared the bank, something stopped him cold. Lying half-concealed beside a fallen log was a small shape. At first glance, it looked like a bundle of cast-off clothes. Then he saw the long black hair, the shallow rise and fall of breath. A girl, maybe 10 years old. Her skin was warm bronze, her dress embroidered with beads. Blood oozed from a cut on her forehead. Her lips were cracked, her face pale. Tobias had seen death enough to know what it looked like before it arrived. She wouldn't survive long without help. His heart thudded against his ribs. Everyone in the town knew the unspoken law about natives. They weren't welcome. Getting involved meant trouble. But as he knelt beside her, the girl's eyes blinked open. Dark and clouded with pain, they met his, and in them he saw something familiar. She tried to speak, but only a breath of sound came out. Tobias looked back toward the town, then down at her again. He knew what had to be done, even if it cost him everything. He reached into his pocket and felt the 3 coins pressing into his palm. Jerky wouldn't save this girl's life. But there was something in that store that might. Something that would take every cent he had, and probably earn him a beating, too. Still, as her breathing weakened, he made his choice. He turned and ran, bare feet slapping hard against the dirt road, coins clenched tight. He knew the salve he needed. Homer kept it locked behind the counter, the kind that cost 50 cents, the kind that healed deep wounds clean. When he burst through the store's door, Homer looked up from his ledger, clearly irritated. "I told you to get lost, boy." "Please, sir." Tobias's voice cracked as he placed his 3 coins on the counter. "There's a girl by the creek. Hurt bad. She's gonna die if she don't get medicine." Homer's eyes narrowed. "What girl? You talking about an Injun?" Tobias nodded once. The irritation on Homer's face turned to anger. "You stupid runt. You want me to waste good salve on one of them." He swiped the coins off the counter, scattering them across the floor. "Get out before I tan your hide." But Tobias stood his ground. He thought of her eyes, of the way pain had swallowed her face, of every moment he'd been cold and hurt and hungry, and no one had cared. His hand dropped to his belt, to the small knife hanging there, the only thing of value he owned. It had been his father's. The last piece of him Tobias had. He pulled it out slowly. The handle, smooth from years of wear, gleamed in the lamplight. "What about this?" Homer's eyes locked on the blade, greedy and calculating. It was good steel, sturdy, worth a couple dollars to someone who knew what to look for. "That girl mean that much to you?" Homer asked. Tobias's throat was tight, but he nodded. "She's dying." Homer snatched the knife and examined it. "Fine, but don't cry to me when her kin come hunting trouble." He ducked behind the counter and came back with a bottle of wound salve and a clean roll of bandages. "And boy, if anyone asks where you got this, you don't know me." Tobias grabbed the items and bolted, heart pounding with fear and purpose. The knife had been his only protection, the only thing he had from a father lost to time. But as he knelt beside the girl once more, he didn't regret it. Gently, he cleaned the gash and applied the thick salve. Her eyelids fluttered, but her breathing was steadier. He cupped water in his hand and let her sip slowly, holding her head with care. As the sun dipped low and colored the sky in fire and gold, the girl's eyes opened wide. She blinked up at him, dazed but clear. Recognition flickered across her face. She tried to sit, but he pressed a hand against her shoulder. "Easy," he whispered. "You're safe." But even as he said it, Tobias's blood chilled. The pounding of hooves echoed in the distance. War cries rolled like thunder across the plains. They were coming, her people, and they would find their missing daughter with a white boy holding medicine he had no right to possess. The riders crested the hill, 6 of them, fierce and fast. Tobias's first thought was to run, but the girl was too weak. He stepped in front of her, his thin body trembling but unmoving. The lead rider swung off his horse in one fluid motion. His face was painted in bold red and black, feathers trailing from his long hair. A tomahawk hung at his waist. He wasn't just any warrior. He looked like a chief. His eyes swept the scene, the girl, the medicine, the scrawny white boy standing in their path. The girl murmured faintly in her native tongue, her voice no more than a breath. Yet whatever she said caused the warrior's rage to melt into something unspoken. He dropped to one knee beside her, his callous hands careful as they touched the dressing on her wound. "Ayana," he murmured, and Tobias heard the tenderness wrapped in that single word. This wasn't just any tribesman. This was her father. The chief lifted his gaze to Tobias, eyes scanning him closely. When he finally spoke, his English was deliberate but unmistakably clear. "You did this? You helped my daughter?" Tobias gave a nod, throat too dry for words. He braced for fury, maybe even an attack. Everyone had warned him. The natives were wild, merciless, killers of white children. But instead, the chief's eyes flicked to the spent medicine bottle, then lingered on Tobias's threadbare clothes and sunken face. "Where did you find medicine?" the chief asked. "You are only a boy. A poor boy." Tobias found his voice at last. "I traded for it. She was dying. I couldn't just stand by." The chief watched him for a long, silent beat, then turned and spoke rapidly to the other warriors. 2 of them dismounted without hesitation and gently lifted Ayana, ready to carry her home. But the chief didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Tobias. "What did you trade?" he asked, his voice low. Tobias lowered his gaze to his empty hands. "My knife. It belonged to my father. Only thing I had left of him." A hush fell between them like breath held too long. The warriors had paused their work, sensing the weight of the moment. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if the earth itself was listening. The chief reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled something out, something that made Tobias's heart jolt. His father's knife. How? Then he understood. The chief had gone into town, had seen Homer with the blade, had bought it back. "A boy who gives up everything to save a stranger's child," the chief said slowly. "This boy carries honor. This boy has a true heart." He extended the knife toward Tobias. "My people owe him a debt." Just as Tobias reached for blade, shouts and hoofbeats thundered from the road. Homer gentry came charging toward them, settlers trailing behind with rifles glinting in the dusk. "There they are," Homer hollered. "Bet that kid's been in league with the savages the whole time." The settlers pulled their horses up short, barely 20 yards out, guns at the ready. Homer's face was flushed with greed and fury as he pointed toward the group. "See that? That little orphan's been scheming with them. Probably set the whole thing up." Chief Kestrel rose slowly, his hand resting on the haft of his tomahawk. His warriors closed ranks, forming a barrier around Ayana and Tobias. The air was electric, thick with the threat of violence. Tobias stood frozen, trapped between 2 worlds on the brink of ruin. "Easy now," called out Samuel Reed, the settlement's de facto leader. "We don't want to fight. Just send the boy over, and we'll forget the rest." "The boy did no wrong," Chief Kestrel answered, voice calm and solid as stone. "He saved my daughter's life." Homer spat into the dust. Don't believe a word of it. That little rat's been casing my store for weeks. Probably told those savages where our supplies were stashed. Tobias's face burned with shame and fury. That's not true. I never... You shut it, Homer snapped. We know what you are. Orphan trash. No loyalty to your own kind. But Chief Kestrel stepped forward and stood in front of Tobias, shielding him with his presence. This child has more honor than any of you, he said. He gave all he had to help someone he didn't know. What have you ever given for another? The settlers stirred uncomfortably, shifting in their saddles. Samuel Reed's rifle dipped slightly. Look, he said, we respect what the boy might have done, but he's one of ours. Let us take him, and we'll deal with him accordingly. Deal with him? The chief echoed, his tone sharpening. For showing mercy? For choosing compassion over hate? He turned fully to face them. You call yourself civilized, yet you punish a boy for kindness. Ayanna stirred in the warrior's arms and said something faint to her father. Whatever she whispered made his face soften briefly, then harden again with fresh resolve. He looked at Tobias, then at the armed men who had come to take him away. My daughter says the boy cried while tending her wounds, the chief said softly. She says he spoke to her with kindness, told her she was safe. This is a child you call a savage. Homer's temper snapped. That's enough. The boy's coming with us, and that's final. He raised his rifle, but before he could even aim, something remarkable happened. Every warrior in the chief's party moved as one. Bows drawn, arrows nocked, their deadly tips all pointed at the settlers in a seamless wave of motion. In an instant, the settlers found themselves staring down a silent wall of precision and lethal intent. But it was Chief Kestrel's voice that made the moment unforgettable. Anyone who harms this boy, he said, his tone booming across the creek, harms my family. He is now under our tribe's protection. Touch him, and you answer to all of us. The quiet that followed was suffocating. Homer's rifle trembled as the reality of their position sank in. They were outnumbered and outmatched. Samuel Reed glanced from his men to the warriors, weighing odds that clearly turned against them. Then Tobias stepped forward, his voice cutting through the thick silence. Wait, he said, looking up at the chief. I can't let this turn into bloodshed over me. Too many people could get hurt. Chief Kestrel looked down at the boy with something close to amazement in his eyes. Even now, you think of others before yourself. As the standoff stretched on, Ayanna whispered something else to her father. His eyes widened, and for the first time since the confrontation began, Chief Kestrel smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. In fact, it made several of the settlers instinctively pull back. There was cold steel in it. He murmured a few words to his daughter, then turned back to face the settlers, voice quiet but heavy with intent. My daughter just told me something interesting about your medicine man, he said, nodding toward Homer. She was awake when the boy came to her with medicine. She heard every word. Homer's face lost all color. What's he talking about? I don't know anything about. She heard you demand the boy's most valued possession in exchange for the medicine, the chief continued. A knife that belonged to his dead father. You preyed on a desperate child to pad your profits. Samuel Reed looked puzzled. Homer, what's he saying? But Homer had already begun to back his horse away, glancing nervously between the warriors and the settlers. It was just business, he muttered. The kid wanted to trade, so we traded. You took full price from a starving orphan so he could save a dying girl, Chief Kestrel said, his voice growing firmer with every word. Then you returned with weapons to punish him for his compassion. The chief reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out not only the boy's knife, but a small leather sack that jingled with coins. I went to your store after I found my daughter, paid your full price for this blade. And do you know what your medicine man did next? He turned to the settlers. He told me exactly where to find a thieving orphan who, in his words, conspired with savages. The settlers' expressions shifted. The looks they gave Homer were no longer trusting. Samuel Reed lowered his rifle entirely. Homer, please tell me you didn't. The boy is nothing but trouble. Homer shouted, panic rising in his voice. You'll see. He'll bring all of them down on us. This will end badly for everyone. But Chief Kestrel wasn't finished. He strode forward, step by step, toward Homer's horse. The storekeeper's rifle shook violently in his grip. "A man who profits from a boy's grief," the chief said quietly, "who turns compassion into suspicion. That man has no honor." Suddenly, the chief seized the barrel of Homer's rifle and yanked it free. The weapon spun through the air and splashed into the creek. Homer nearly toppled from his saddle, grabbing the reins just in time. "You will not lay a hand on this child," the chief declared. "He is worth more than all of you combined." Samuel Reed cleared his throat, clearly rattled. "Now, Chief, let's not let this get out of hand. We can settle this peacefully. Let the boy come back with us. We'll make sure Homer treats him fair." Chief Kestrel turned his gaze to Tobias, who stood frozen between the opposing sides. The boy's eyes were wide, not just with fear and confusion, but something else, maybe hope, that someone finally saw him as more than a burden. "The choice is yours, young warrior," the chief said, voice soft now. "But know this, my people never forget those who show kindness to our children." Just as Tobias opened his mouth to answer, a new sound cut through the air, more horses, their hoofbeats rumbling across the open plains. This time, though, they were coming from the direction of the native encampment, and they weren't few. A line of 20 warriors appeared at the horizon, galloping hard toward the creek. The settlers' faces drained of color, panic sweeping through them. A few turned their horses, ready to bolt, but Chief Kestrel raised a hand, and his riders reined in just past the reach of any arrow. "They won't attack," the chief said, voice steady. "Not unless you give them cause." Samuel Reed's voice trembled. "What do you want from us?" The chief looked down at Tobias, who stood frozen between two sides poised for war. "I want justice for this boy," he said, "and I want my people to witness what real bravery looks like." He called out in his native language, and one of the mounted warriors broke from the line, approaching alone. As the rider drew near, Tobias saw he was an elder, gray streaks in his hair and a face weathered by many winters. "This is Running Bear, our keeper's stories," Kestrel explained. "He will bear witness to what unfolds today, so that even the grandchildren of our grandchildren will know the truth." Running Bear dismounted and walked to where Iona rested in a warrior's embrace. He inspected the bandages wrapped around her injury, then turned to Tobias, his eyes sharp and deep, seeming to peer straight into the boy's soul. He began to speak in his native tongue, his voice flowing like a river over stones. When he finished, Chief Kestrel gave a solemn nod. "He says the spirit spoke to him in a dream last night," the chief translated. "They said a lost child would save one of ours, and that this act would shift the path of both our peoples." Homer let out a bitter laugh, desperate and mocking. Dreams and spirits, just heathen superstition. But Running Bear stepped toward him and spoke, in flawless English, each word heavy with meaning. "You call us heathens," he said, "but your own holy book teaches mercy for orphans and strangers. This child lived that truth while you counted your silver." He turned next to Tobias, kneeling to meet the boy's eyes, his expression full of quiet intensity. "Tell me, child, why did you help our daughter? Were you hoping for reward?" Tobias shook his head. "No, sir. She was hurt and scared. I felt that before. I knew." A smile touched Running Bear's weathered face, and he laid a gentle hand on Tobias's shoulder. "In our tribe," he said, "there is no greater honor than standing for the defenseless. You carry the heart of a warrior." He rose and spoke again to Chief Kestrel, who listened with care and then turned to face everyone, settlers and warriors alike. "Running Bears reminded me of an old tradition," the chief said. "When a person saved the life of a chief's child, they are bound to the tribe, not by blood, by honor." Samuel Reed found his voice. "What does that mean?" Kestrel looked straight at Tobias. "It means this boy, who once had no family, now has one, if he chooses. My daughter lives because of him. My people will be proud to call him brother." A hush fell over the clearing as the weight of those words settled in. Tobias's heart pounded. For the first time, someone was offering him more than survival. A place, a name, a family that valued compassion over wealth. He could barely begin to process it when Ayana stirred weakly in the warrior's arms and murmured something. Her father bent close to hear, then stood upright, eyes filled with surprise, and perhaps even joy. "My daughter has asked for something," he said. "She wishes to give this boy a gift for saving her life, something that will change everything." Ayana whispered to the warrior carrying her, who gently lowered her to her feet. Though unsteady, she stepped forward, determination bright in her eyes. From around her neck, she lifted a small leather pouch, beautifully adorned with beadwork. Chief Kestrel's eyes widened. "Ayana, no, that's too valuable." But she shook her head with quiet resolve and continued toward Tobias. When she reached him, she extended the pouch with trembling hands. "For you," she said softly, in careful English, "because you gave all you had." Tobias looked from the pouch to the chief. "What is it?" Running Bear stepped forward, reverent. "Inside are sacred stones from the mountain where our people first touched the land. That pouch has been in the chief's family for 7 generations. It is—" he paused, searching. "It is a guide to something beyond value."